Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm Danny Lichtenfeld, director of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and it's my pleasure to be your host for this conversation tonight with Saks Afridi and Sadaf Padder. We're offering this event in connection with the exhibition SpaceMosque, which features work by Saks and was curated by Sadaf. And that exhibition is on view here at the Brattleboro Museum through October 19th. You can read more about the exhibition and see installation photos on our website, brattleboromuseum.org. At the end of the conversation tonight, we'll do a Q&A and hope that you'll participate in that. Saks and Sadaf will respond to your questions and comments at that time rather than during the conversation itself. So if you'd like to submit a question or comment, please just use the Q&A button on your screen. You can enter questions or comments there at any time, but then we'll wait until the end to get into them. Okay, I'm going to ask our special guests tonight to join me on screen now as I tell you a little bit about them. So Saks and Sadaf, you're welcome to join anytime.
Hello.
Hello to you both. I just want to share a little bit of information about each of you with our audience. Saks Afridi was born in Peshawar, Pakistan, and studied advertising at the Academy of Art in San Francisco, and then sculpture at the Art Students League of New York. Saks speaks English, Urdu, Pashto, and conversational Arabic. He's a recipient of multiple Cannes Lions Awards, a D&AD Pencil Award, a One Show Pencil Award, and a United Nations Award for Peace and Understanding. Saks's work has been featured in Artforum and the New York Times and on the BBC, Al Jazeera, CNN, and The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. Saks's work exists in a genre he calls Sci-Fi Sufism, which is about discovering galaxies and worlds within yourself. Sadaf Padder is a Brooklyn-based curator, writer, and community organizer. She focuses on excavating under-recognized contemporary art movements and histories related to the South Asian and Caribbean diasporas. She's curated exhibits across the country from Philadelphia to Los Angeles to Martha's Vineyard, weaving connections between various communities by highlighting themes of social justice, futurism, radical liberation movements, climate change, and neo-mythology. Sadaf has worked as a public school educator and administrator, and she maintains a dedicated community-based practice where she develops youth arts programs and internships. She's a board member of the Vera List Center for Art and Politics and co-director of Grown in Haiti, a reforestation organization located in the mountains of Jacmel. Saks, Sadaf, thank you so much for doing this tonight. It's so nice to see your faces, and I'm really looking forward to this conversation.
Thanks, Jenny. And thank you for
I'm going to disappear now and turn it over to the two of you. And so please just let me know when you're ready to do Q&A, and I'll come back on the screen.
Sounds good.
Thank you. And thank you for that wonderful introduction.
You're muted, but it looked really lovely what he was saying. Okay, assalamualaikum, Baya.
Wa alaikum salam. How are you, Sadaf?
I'm
Nice
doing
to see you.
good. Always nice to see you. It's been a nice journey, moving into this exhibition. So I want to thank everyone who's joined in. You and I have gotten to kind of build and grow over the last few years. This is our first major project together, and inshallah, the first of many. But what I've come to realize is every time I talk to you, every time I see something, I just realize how there's so many layers to your thinking process, right? And the way you've gone around this concept in particular, SpaceMosque. So my hope is today that we can kind of spend some time talking about the works in this exhibition specifically, but then zoom out, and kind of spend time with the story and some of the parts of the story that are not right now in Brattleboro, but that exist in the world that is SpaceMosque.
Yes, absolutely.
So
Also, good choice of background, by the way. So,
You know, I thought so. I was gonna go with the sighting. So I want to drop, kind of pose this to the audience as well, and just think through, there's many stories I think we've grown up with that ask, if you had 3 wishes, what would you wish for? And I want to ask, and you can think on this, you can drop it in the chat. And Sax, I want to ask this to you as well. What would you pray for if you encountered a space mosque? So, for folks who are listening, I want you to think on that question. If when something comes to mind, drop it in the chat. But Sax, I want to pose that to you because I realized that I have not asked you that myself.
yeah, absolutely. So what SpaceMosque made realized prayers in the in the narrative. That's kind of what it does. So I guess you could give a analogous to a fairy tale genie version of it, but this was more of a conduit to the Almighty. But what would I pray for besides a free Palestine would be the ability for all humans to have empathy, this level of empathy where they are incapable of not seeing the others, sides and perspective and approach as well. It's like just there would be no avoiding it. That would be a nice trait for us humans to have, and hopefully one day we will.
Yeah, increase empathy. I always, I think it's been years, but I always joke, like, if I know one artist is going to create a teleportation machine, it's going to be you. And then when I asked you that today, that was the same thing you were explaining.
Yes, exactly. Teleportation requires molecules to move, and in a way, for us to understand the molecules of the other, if
Yeah.
we do that, we actually are teleporting. So it would be a form of teleportation if this prayer came through, that everybody could empathize with everybody else. Then you are teleporting in a way.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the goals, one of the surprising, beautiful parts of this exhibition as well, is that I think it does propel kind of connection, especially for folks who might not have grown with, a close relationship with Islam or Muslims. Like, this is not an exhibition, geared towards a specific audience. It's actually meant to be very broad reaching and very,
that was the intention, for it to while it leads with the name SpaceMosque, and it happens and is set, or it's I guess its inception of the first sightings are set in a part of the world that is of the Muslim faith, or that is not really sort of shown in your stereotypical science fiction story. So that it's sort of led by that, but it is not designed to be an Islamic exhibit, a Muslim exhibit by any means. In fact, it's intended to be universal. The whole thing about SpaceMosque was, when the vessel arrived, everybody saw it, and it manifested itself differently, and everybody saw it differently based on their own faiths and biases. And so that's why we have so many different sightings in the exhibit as well, because they're sightings of different people. Everybody saw it differently, everybody experienced it differently. And so it's just that the first time people actually saw it was in we believe around 2002, 2003 time period in Karachi, Pakistan. And it was a hovering minaret, and so the media dubbed it SpaceMosque, and the moniker kind of stuck throughout the course of the time that it was here, which we think was about 3 to 4 years, around the years 2002 to 2005, somewhere around that time, post-internet, pre-social media.
Yeah, and
based on the artifacts that we found so far.
Right. And so I guess the question I have around the sightings is, one, how many sightings are there, have there been? And then also, can you just talk us through the process of actually how you created these and their connection to some more ancient influences?
Absolutely, absolutely. So I think we have maybe 7 or 8 sightings so far. More are to be discovered, if you will. Now, the actual creation of these art objects made to look real, this whole entire sort of genre, or not genre, but approach towards this project is a very parafiction project, which is fiction made to look real. Which is kind of why I refer to it in terms of things that actually happened with a certain sense of matter of factness. But the way these were created were using objects from Islamic architecture, from 3D models of engineering components and engines and mechanics and spaceship models and things like that. And I created from the sightings, I created most of them, but some of them, like this one, for example, on the right, actually pretty much most of the artifacts and this sighting were created by architect Ferda Kolatan and his students at Pratt University. And part of the approach for a project like this is, if there's going to be artifacts found and sightings seen, they have to have some kind of visual language in which, at least initially, you know. So that was one thing that I found Ferda's work on Instagram, and I really sort of liked his aesthetic of how he used and hybridized different things. And so we met and spoke and talked about this concept of spiritual machines. And so we briefed his class and armed them with this arsenal of architectural objects to kit bash together and sort of create this sense of, okay, well, these objects are neither Islamic, but they're neither your typical science fiction. They're somewhere in the middle. Like the sculpture on the left is the will engine. It's a component of the will engine. And if you look in there, the lines and everything is actually Arabic calligraphy, which is then lathed and round and shaped and, you know, turned into different things and made to look like gold and marble. It's actually 3D printed and painted. So nothing is what it seems throughout in this in this exhibit. And on the right as well, some of those images you see there are also of artifacts. They look like photographs of artifacts that were found from this forgotten time, this forgotten phenomenon. And then the sightings, so some of the other sightings I did, yeah, like these, I worked on these myself. And both of these, in fact, I have a whole other body of work that are woven works that are rugs. I work with weavers in Pakistan and Iran and Afghanistan. And so both of these are taken from a leaf from a Persian rug. Was its sort of initial shape direction. And then like the image on the right was then it was flattened and twisted. And, you know, believe it or not, it was inspired by a lemon squeezer, an orange juice squeezer. And so, but it has this very Islamic sort of dome top that I found that an orange squeezer kind of has as well. So I was sort of inspired and combined both of them. Same with the image on the left, and then the textures and the calligraphy and other elements that are on there, I create and put together in Cinema 4 in a tool called Cinema 4D, and render them out as photoreal images. And then these are usually prints on different mediums, whether they're aluminum or paper or you know, variety of different. Actually, mostly they've been aluminum prints. At the exhibit, we have them as foam core prints for the for exhibition purposes, but which is nice because we can blow them up at larger sizes, and you know, they're much easier to travel with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess I'm also curious about the process of just the digital creation of these, especially because when I'm sharing images or talking about SpaceMosque and people see the imagery now that we're living in the age of AI, a
Yeah.
lot of in their AI, and which also comes with the perception that there's, and we've talked about this, that there's not a lot of effort put in that. But I know the way I've seen you use AI, that's very much not the case. So just run us through kind of like, okay, you're sourcing the influences, you're running it through Cineport, like talk us through the stages and also about how much time would you say goes into creating one sighting?
Oh, time wise, I think I probably spent months on some of them and weeks on others, and I don't think there was anything in days. This was a 3D tool that I taught myself by watching YouTube, and and I basically took elements and components, whether they're 3D objects, flat illustrations, which I can then place on a 3D object and extrude and bring out, and then twist and turn and manipulate to sort of make into different things. So it's very much sculpting, just done digitally. And then the process of getting the right light, putting it in the right part of the world with the right sort of time of day, and making it look like a photograph. Then I bring it into Photoshop, I bring it into a variety of yeah, it goes through a bunch of different tools, and these are tools that I've learned along the way over the years. Whether it's in my day job as a creative director in advertising, or in my art practice, whenever I have any kind of thought, I like to either sketch it out or go to the computer and visualize it. And I'm, fortunately capable or able to visualize something that's in my mind pre AI, and it was a real sort of help for me to be able to do that. But then after AI came along, man, it just exploded. The ability to visualize something that you have in your mind, even if you sketch something out or make something crudely in a tool like Photoshop, and then you can bring it into a tool like Midjourney or Firefly or DALL-E or so many others, and then ask it to do different things. And lately I've been talking to ChatGPT and asking it to change images, and I'm doing it in such a human way that it feels very Star Trekky.
Yeah, yeah.
But yes, all the entire, coming back to your question, all of SpaceMosque was created and made entirely without AI, using 3D tools. Like the students used Maya, and then I did the rendering in Octane, which is another rendering tool on my end. But then there are other parts of the exhibit that are newspapers, and those were made using actual newspaper presses in Pakistan. There's a heart, that's another artifact, a very different looking artifact that is, one of these things doesn't look like the other. It's a little, it has a slightly different aesthetic to it, and that's because it's a newly discovered artifact, and it's like a language that can kind of develop. So the thing about SpaceMosque is, because everybody saw the vessel differently, they saw it based on their own ideas and biases, and so this lends itself to having multiple sort of visual artifacts and objects that can be found that are connected to it, because each human story is different, and the way they saw it and experienced it is different. If I ask you where you were on I don't know, I'm gonna think of some historic or crazy day, say 9/11. You would remember exactly where you were on 9/11 and your experience of what happened that day, and I'm sure it was very different than mine. But we both sort of lived it, and if we had to choose artifacts of today, we would probably choose very different artifacts. And they would probably look very different as well.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
kind of like that.
For sure. And I think that that's, I think even analogizing kind of the emotional memory of something, whether something momentous, whether it's tragic or it's remarkable. And I think it's part of what you pull out of the story of SpaceMosque is this kinetic force of it, that there's a push and pull, there's a give and a take. It's, your prayer, it might have a positive impact or it might have one you can't even anticipate.
Yeah.
That's part of the gift of, I think, that you have as a storyteller.
Thank you. I think storytelling is very much part of the art of this project. A lot of artists make artworks that have multiple readings, that can have multiple readings. I make artworks that have multiple readings. In this case, these artworks have a narrative connected to it, and they are artifacts of a narrative. And while one can instill multiple meanings into the works, but they are, by and large, connected to another part of the art, which is the story of it as well. And I wanted to tell a story of humanity, try and tell the story of humanity through this project. And the good of it and the bad of it. And the fact is that both sides exist, and good things happened and bad things happened in this during this phenomenon. And the exhibit tries to capture some of it, and there's a lot yet that has not been shown and exhibited and captured, and in due time, hopefully will.
Yeah, absolutely. And I want to get at that, but before we do, I want to give the audience also an example of kind of the work you were doing with I don't think the woven portals were AI, were they?
Oh, everybody thinks they were.
Or an AI. So, but I just want to give you all just a sense of the scope of Sachs's digital illustrations, I'll call them, but also an example of an AI piece, this heart piece.
Also not AI.
What?
Yes.
Blow my mind. Okay, but how? But also
3D, free AI.
Okay, so Sachs is a magician is basically what we're getting at here. But this is an example of where you're conceiving of something, you're creating it, and then this then became a tangible object, right? Or an iteration of it. So there even it lives here, but the way it's traveling, I think is remarkable. And that's what several of these, I think that's what's amazing about your skill set within that digital realm is that you can imagine creating things without having some limits of physicality that we would if you were just working in like traditional sculptural methods.
Absolutely. Traditional sculptural methods are, and I've been trained in traditional sculpting methods as well. And there's nothing that beats making something out of clay and feeling it and holding it and seeing it from different angles. But then the ability to imagine what that heart of clay can look like if it's, well, what if it was a made of wool of a Persian rug, a tribal Persian rug, and what if it was beating like that? And then the Persian rug represents so many parts of you, so people have connected with that piece for, I think, probably that reason. But then there are other parts of me as well, like that are, and all of us that are electric in nature. And so I combine things like electronics and circuitry and even mechanical components and things like that. And so for that, I use some AI tools to help me visualize some of these things to serve as blueprints of where these sculptures could go. And then, for example, the sculpture that's here at Brattleboro came out of all these various different blueprints that I had sort of developed, and I worked with an embroiderer in Pakistan to sculpt the embroidery around this heart. So it kind of goes, real touched by hand goes into digital, goes into AI, comes back into digital. When I say digital and AI, I separate them because with digital, it's still touched by hand. And then it goes into AI and then comes back and then finally goes back into hand as the final object. I've been doing these with paintings recently as well. So I've just really excited to be living in a time where we're able to use tools like these AI tools within our process, or at least my process, and I've incorporated it in a way where it really helps me. And
Yeah.
it's a tool. It's not a lot of people sort of see it as, oh, it's gonna end my career, or it's gonna change things. And yes, it is gonna change things, but it depends on how you look at it. I think it can
Yeah,
change things for the better.
for sure.
Imagination is just, if you can imagine it, you can now visualize it.
Right.
Or you can now write about it or think about it, or take your imagination 10 times further by asking AI to reimagine your imagination in different ways, and open up other new corridors in ways that you hadn't really thought of.
Mhm.
And that's where I think writers are beginning to use AI to their benefit. That's where visualizers are doing the same. That's where people with pretty much every category. I mean, look at cancer research. So yeah, this became a seminar about AI.
We're gonna bring it back. So creative director, a lot of collaborations. That's also a key ingredient of your practice, is just harnessing the people around you, seeking people out to create some of these works that are most of these works that are in the exhibition. So I thought we could just spend a little time talking about, other collaborations, including the newspaper, and then, the iconic Hava sandal. So let's start with the newspaper and just talk us through who worked on this with you and how you've kind of fed the folks who ended up writing these articles or stories.
Absolutely. I was referred through a journalist friend of mine at Al Jazeera, who then worked at Dawn News in Pakistan at the time. I put out a thing on Instagram of, hey, I'm looking for somebody who works at a newspaper in Pakistan for a project. And my friend connected me with a journalist at Dawn News by the name of Mansoor Mani, who is a well-known journalist in Pakistan. And so he put together a small team, and together we started writing we found articles from that time, and then we drew some inspiration from actual events that happened during that time. And then I wrote down a bunch of stories that I had written over the course of a few months that could be potential news stories. I talked to journalists and economists and other professors and pundits, etc., about what would happen in a world where prayer became the de facto global currency, and what would the news be like. And so then Mansoor and I started going through a lot of those stories, and he came back with a very local perspective of, there's a story that happened at this lake over here. I'm covering it next week. We could go shoot it, and then we could write a story around that. And so we wrote a story about this dried bed lake, and of this woman who lost her child, who drowned in the bed lake, and she prayed for the water to be gone forever. But then the fishermen were, they were screwed because they couldn't fish, and all they, so there was this back and forth that happened. And so, to your point earlier, with every prayer answered, there's it has an impact onto somebody else as well. And one of those stories that came about was a local story that happened in Kohat, Pakistan, incidentally, where I'm from in Pakistan, is the story of a 12-year-old boy whose parents were estranged, separated, and he was very close to his father, but he lived with his mother in Peshawar, which is about an hour away. And so he prayed that he would be able to see his father more often. And so the next morning, he woke up, and his sandals, these are his Peshawari sandals, or kere as we call them in Pashto, had grown wings. And so that allowed him to fly after school every day to go see his dad for a couple of hours and come back. And a local newspaper reporter picked up the story and wrote on it, and it was in the paper. So that's kind of how we found it. Now, coming to the reality of how these were actually made, I was referred to this company called Marfor, which has now been rebranded, and they're called Craftpoor. I reached out to them and their founders. They made these really cool sneaker sandals. And these are basically traditional Peshawari chappals, and they had the genius idea of putting like a sneaker sole in it, like a like a Vans or a Converse sneaker sole under it. So made it very comfortable. These typical chappals usually have like a tire, a rubber tire sole under them, which is really cool and rugged looking, but a sneaker sole is much more comfortable. And
What did
I
Danny say? Most comfortable shoes he's ever worn in his entire life?
that's what he said. Yes, yes. And it's true. I wear them around New York City on a regular basis. So proposed this idea of wings to them, and I worked very closely with their creative director, Noor, and we designed these wings from local birds and a variety of different mixes till we sort of liked the pattern and the way it flowed. The very first one we made was an actual sculpture, which is on the previous page. If you notice, the wings are a lot bigger, and those actually have metal inside them as an armature to hold the wings up that way and give it that little curl. In actuality, those are too big to wear. And so I spoke with the team and we decided that, hey, let's make a wearable, like a limited edition wearables out of them. And so that's what's on the next page, is then over the years, this is sort of turned into an actual product, a winged sneaker sandal. Now we have them, you can get them on the Craft4 website under artist collaborations. It's in a white, a tan, and now a black as well. And I believe Danny has a black that he was rocking at the opening, and it was he was looking really fly in the process. I'm sorry, I have to throw all these, not aero flying terminology.
It's so good. And they're also in the gift shop. If you are visiting
Yeah.
the exhibition, you go to that gift shop, you can see a couple of the wearable pairs there
Yes,
as well.
the Brattleboro edition.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's one of my favorites. Because it's also drawing, it's reminiscent of mythologies from other cultures as well. It's giving, Nike and Greek and Roman
Yes.
mythology.
Yes.
And winged creatures also something that comes up in Islamic folklore and mythology with the Buraq and these
Yeah.
other beings.
And then I collaborated with a photographer in Pakistan to shoot the Pakistan photos, and then I shot the photos in New York of the flying shots. The Hawa sandals themselves sort of went off on a little campaign on their own, and they sort of have their own little
Yeah,
world.
I'll show folks, kind of the as I think we can see, you're seeing the flying shots, yeah, here. So
Yeah.
this kind of assemblage of what those flying shots are as well. And even with the newspapers, there's some doctoring happening as well. I think I'm thinking about the story of Faiz Ahmed and the way
Yeah, of course, definitely. So I reached out to Salima Hashmi, who
just for
is
calling Faiz Ahmed, folks, is one of the most renowned Pakistani poets,
yes,
no longer
yes.
living. And someone
Faiz Ahmed Faiz was Pakistan's probably greatest poet, up there, top two, top three. And Salima Hashmi is his daughter, but also a renowned artist, educator, activist, and just all round teacher, an institution in her own right. And so I asked her to participate in this project and write an op-ed that would be in the newspaper of the time. And so she wrote about a prayer that she had that was realized, and the prayer was to spend a day with her father again. And so in the op-ed, the article, she writes about what that day was like. And there's also a photo of her with her father, and they're, essentially the same age in the photo.
Yeah.
She was nice enough to, she found a photo of her and her mom, and then she posed at a similar pose, and then I photoshopped it together and kind of put it together. This
Yeah.
was these newspapers were also kind of done. Think of this as like this was 2017, 2018. A lot of these were coming together, and this was sort of the height of fake news when fake news was, Donald Trump had made fake news. I guess a popular word, and so this was all being sort of written and fabricated together, both the Urdu newspapers as well as the English newspapers. And the Urdu newspapers are, we believe, further down the road because some of the stories have matured as well. Some of the advertising in the newspaper is of a world where where this vessel is normalized, where prayer realization is normalized, and corporations have started advertising their services around prayer realization services and things like that. So you see ads that talk about that in the Urdu newspaper that you don't in the English newspaper.
Yeah. And I wonder, I'm glad you spoke on that because I wanted to ask, what are other components that we didn't see here? But I wonder with a story like Faiz Ahmed and then bringing in his daughter and just to the experience of her imagining this and writing it and then seeing this picture that in a way they do get to at least live out part of the feeling of
Yes.
I'm sure the experience becomes so, and just in the execution of the imagination into something tangible.
I mean, it all really started from this one phrase that I read, which kind of connected a bunch of different dots in my head, which was, if all your prayers could come true, would it change the world or just yours?
Mhm.
And that is that thread is kind of goes through the whole thing. And if there's anything that I want people to take away from this work is really them asking themselves that question and to what end would your world change around?
Yeah, yeah. I think what I would like to do is kind of work, I'm going to round us out to our final few questions. I do want to take a chance and just share, some of the incredible work that exists around SpaceMosque that is not in this exhibition, and maybe not even in the United States, but inshallah one day. And then kind of looking at what's next for SpaceMosque, or what you would like to, highlighting what you're currently working on. So talk to us about this stunning sculpture.
Yeah, this was an 18-foot sculpture of one of the sightings, sighting number one, at the Theseus Temple, a Greek temple in the center of Vienna. And it was part of an exhibit that was done by the World Museum. And I was invited to exhibit SpaceMosque at this temple as like a solo exhibit within this temple. They give it out every summer to a different artist every year, and I had the honor of holding the space last year from May till October, November, and then it stayed on at the museum until January. And the sculpture and some of the artifacts now are also in Vienna, no longer with the museum. They're exhibited at the European Space Policy Institute, which I think is a great place for for the sculpture to be. So it can still be viewed there. It's perhaps just a little shorter because their ceilings aren't as high, but it can be seen there. This was a wonderful project experience working with the World Museum, and I worked with a local fabricator there to put it together. So that was also like there wasn't a lot of back and forth and shipping, and so it was done through these wonderful Zoom sessions where we modeled it out, and then the building and the process, and then it was all installed. And I have to say, it was so magical, sort of coming into the space and just sort of seeing this massive thing being hung. And apparently, this was a big deal to have to have in Vienna, a city that prides itself for keeping the Ottomans at bay and keeping Islam out of Europe. Or so I was told when I was there, and you know, including perhaps a couple of right-wing newspaper journalists that interviewed me, asking me some interesting questions like that. But overall, it was received very, very positively. I want to say over 150, 200,000 people or something saw it, or like walked through it or past it, or it was some very impressive number like that. And yeah, I'd love to see where I would love to bring a sculpture of that scale to the US as well, and have it travel. I think the story is continuing to develop. I'm working on a graphic novel. I'm currently about maybe my writing partner Eddie Van Bloom and I are, I'd say, about 90% done with the story, and maybe the first 3 issues all thought out, and the next step is to start illustrating it, and that's a whole other head that I'm going to be getting into. But then in addition to that, there are lots of ideas of artifacts and stories and other news components and video components that have not been shared with the world yet, that this project really is the gift that keeps on giving, because more and more stories keep coming out, and they can come out from different parts of the world with different frameworks, you know, as opposed to your typical Western canon framework. I've always wanted to try and make this a global story, sci-fi being told at a human level from other parts of the world besides, you know, a UFO over the White House.
Yeah, absolutely. And then let's bring it to what it was like to show this in Brattleboro. You know, how it was,
Yeah,
you know,
right.
it was your first time in Brattleboro. You know, I had gone last year for the exhibition I'd done with, you know, the last exhibition, but
Guys, expression is exactly
right?
what people felt, and my expression is exactly how I felt as well. Just heartfelt gratitude for the reception there. People really gravitated towards it. They connected with it on multiple levels. You know, while it touches on spirituality, it isn't really a spiritual project. It's really a project inviting us to just connect with our humanity, and that's it. And I guess that's one of the purposes of religion. But in this case, I think that it did that with people of all ages and backgrounds. And that's another thing I was blown away by, the folks in Brattleboro, not just the museum and everyone connected to the museum, but the people in the town and the visitors on the exhibit as well. It was really, really magical, and I hope to go again. And it's one of those places where, like, wow, like these magical places like this really do exist.
Yeah, we were very, very warmly received. So very, very grateful to Brattleboro for that. And I think with that, I want to, you know, kind of, if there's any last thoughts, but I think this is a good segue into questions or prayers from the audience. But just so much thanks, you know, Sax, for trusting me in this journey, for, you know, us heading into Vermont together, and just looking forward to kind of where SpaceMosque will
I
go.
was going to actually, you stole my thanks. I was going to thank you, and I was going to thank Danny as well for making this happen. And it takes and Sarah, and it takes folks like you to get projects like this out there so people can kind of see, and hopefully we build bridges, we expand minds along the way, and you know, they get to see something that they haven't seen or experienced before. So thank you for the opportunity to both of you.
I've just been sitting here sort of smiling and feeling so warm. I I just echo right back to you, reflect back to both of you, all the sentiments that you were just sharing. This has been, I've been here at this museum for 17 years now, and this has been one of the most special experiences, having this exhibition and the way our community has received it, and the experience of working with the two of you. It's really been so special on so many levels. And I would just add to what you were saying about the relationship between the work and people who come see it and so on. In our community, one of the really notable aspects of that is simply the representation of Islam in a non-negative light, even in a positive light, and how much that has meant to so many people who have come to the museum, of all faiths, it seems, how much they have appreciated that, and that that's something that we've heard. And so it feels great to be able to be part of creating that experience and putting that out into the world. And really, all of us at the museum are so grateful to both of you.
Oh, thanks, Tim.
I want to thank you for this conversation. I feel a little bad popping in and almost feel like I'm interrupting because it's such a...
Are you wearing your shoes though?
What's that? No, I'm not wearing, I forgot to wear my shoes.
Now you should feel bad. No, I'm just
I'm
kidding.
sorry, I know. But I will absolutely avow that they are the most comfortable shoes I've ever worn. I love them so much. We have a gala coming up in a few weeks, and I think for sure I'll...
They look great with a tux.
Let's go.
With a tux, yeah. I want to invite our audience out there, please, to join the conversation if you'd like. Please use the Q&A button to add any questions or comments that you have for Sachs and Sadaf. And I've jotted down a few things that if you wouldn't mind, I'd toss out at you to get maybe, get this Q&A kind of started. Why do you think that the SpaceMosque seems to have first appeared when it did, around 2002? You said something earlier about post-internet, pre-social media.
Yeah.
I'm curious if you feel like that there was some significance to that in that regard, or if there was some other reason why SpaceMosque may have appeared around that.
I wanted it to be after 9/11. I don't think I would be making art that is, I guess, inherently the process. My process of my need for starting to make art was to build bridges, and this need to battle Islamophobia that we forget now, but it was on such heightened, it was at such a height post 9/11 that I just remember that time when when President Bush spoke to Musharraf and basically said, you're either with us or we're going to bomb you to the Stone Ages, literally, were his words. And this idea of making, Bin Laden the bad guy, and the Taliban and Islam, and people, just violence and happening here towards Muslims and Sikhs and so many other people at the time. So I wanted to kind of go back to a period in history when Islamophobia was at a height, and 2002 felt like a good time for that. And then I also wanted to eliminate social media out of the equation of the narrative, just because social media is still developing every day. And if you do something that was even last year feels so dated, I mean, think about things like Vine or MySpace, like these are just so antiquated things. So I wanted to kind of keep it a little more universal and open, but yet not at the age of rotary phones. So I thought that the 2002 to 2005 was a good time period.
Yeah, that makes all the sense in the world. It's interesting, isn't it? How our sense of history and the definition of certain historical periods, how and when it takes shape. And I can't say that I've really thought about that period of time as a period of time that has those distinct qualities, critically different from what came shortly before it and soon after it. But what you're saying makes a ton of sense.
Yeah, it really
Um,
defined my trajectory within art, or the area that and topics I focus on. These were done by circumstance more than by choice, and over time they've become choice and voice. But they didn't. I don't think they started off that way. They started off with they came from a place of need.
yeah, yeah. Um,
You
Saxon
know,
set off. Oh,
say that.
I'm sorry. Go
I'll
ahead.
just add one piece is like the experience of 9/11 for the American Muslim is a pivotal one, right? Because we can all kind of, if those of us who are old enough can define kind of a marked shift in the way we exist, we knew we were being perceived, and the way we had to start moving. And so I didn't know this context, but I'm not surprised that this was, kind of a turning point in your practice as well.
Thank you. There's a comment and a question here from Catherine Stowe, who says, "Thank you for the beautiful conversation. The SpaceMosque theme is so gorgeous and deep. The humanitarian theme is so important, especially now. It actually feels like it could migrate to film really well. How do you feel about that?"
I feel very positive about that.
Yeah.
I would like for that to happen very much. And I've actually started. I had started the process of doing that. I was introduced to some folks, some people who have connections with Netflix, and they've asked me to write episodes and write it as as something, and to sort of propose it, and I have to kind of go about doing that. That's also a whole world where it can go, and this writing of the graphic novel is really a very similar. It's the same process, so it's really writing out a story, and then I think it can just take form in changing it. So I'm closer today from a story perspective than I ever was, and it's just a matter for the right person to kind of see it or be put in front of, where it can be materialized.
Mm,
As inshallah, God willing, in time,
yeah,
it'll
yeah.
happen. And if there's anyone from
That's
Netflix or Amazon Prime or anyone else listening, let's chat.
those are such exciting possibilities. I really hope this graphic novel materializes. I mean, film, obviously, like such a powerful and incredible medium, and would work so well. I think I agree with Katie for this story, this project, and yet graphic novel, I feel like, um, because it takes less resources up front to develop a graphic novel, I feel like could potentially go on and on and on, and the story
Yes.
could just evolve and evolve, and that's such an exciting thought for me.
We'll be sending
Um,
you a copy, Danny, don't worry.
yeah. uh, so I have a question the about the wishes and the unintended consequences of wishes. Um, I I really and there, you shared a quote, but I didn't catch where you said that quote came from. That was sort of encapsulates this idea about, are your wishes
If all
only
your
changing
wishes
your
were
world, or
to
are
come
they
true,
changing the
would it
world?
change the world or just yours? It's an unknown author.
Okay, yeah, yeah. Um, So I feel like, well, I guess I'd rather ask you this question rather than just say how I feel. Uh, Do you feel like it's a certain kind of narrow and maybe somewhat self-centered wish that is the kind of wish that can create these problems and generate this conflict among wishes? And I just wonder if you feel like in general, people in the world, if presented with this opportunity, if that's what their wishes would look like, or if perhaps people's wishes would be something more elevated than that.
Absolutely. Uh, I think people's initial wishes are going to be primal and selfish, and then over time, humanity will realize that you have to be more thoughtful with your prayers and wishes, and then will adjust accordingly. And that's kind of what happened in the phenomenon as well. You know, everybody started praying for money until money became worthless.
Mhm.
And the same goes with the need for the power and control of power, and he who controls the wishes that come true is the one who controls power. And so all of those sort of dark side of humanity also comes through. But then there were, I'm gonna get at this from a couple of different ways. Uh, there was a part of the story that is not shared in the exhibit, and that is that a few enterprising people, one person particularly who leads a team, notices that children's prayers get answered more commonly, or more effectively than adult prayers, and that's because of the level of intention that is included in their prayers. And so this gives him an idea where he gets his child's class to start praying for things, and then that expands slowly to the school, and then that brings the rise of the prayer farms and the prayer campuses that happen. And then once the prayer farms start existing around uh, the world's corporations, governments, religions all become their clients. And so it becomes kind of monetized and controlled by humans at that point. And you know, he who then leads the prayer farms in a way ends up being a god of sorts. And so, you know, that's kind of, so good things happen at that point, but then some selfless things also happen. And that's, I think, another common theme is that while there are a lot of selfish people in the world, there are also a lot of selfless people in the world. And they exist. We just don't hear enough from the selfless people because it's in their nature not to shout and scream, but we hear and see the actions of selfish more. But yeah, that's, long story short, all kind of part of the narrative there. There are other things that happen. There's a character, placeholder name, Shahid. He's a priest. He's an imam. And he and his wife have been trying to have a baby for a long time. And after the vessel appears, but yet people don't know that it's really that it's responding to prayers. He's obviously very, or people do know, but he's very against it because he doesn't believe that there should be some kind of device between you and God, and it's a direct connection. And but he doesn't want people to start worshiping the spaceship. And so there's this scene in the graphic novel where his wife is praying at night in this baby room that they've made because they've had a miscarriage before. And as she finishes praying, in the window, you see a silhouette of the SpaceMosque, and she finishes praying, and then she kind of looks towards it, and we don't know whether she prayed to it or not, but we do know that the following week she's pregnant. And like where does that baby was that God, was that the spaceship, or was that, he finds out there's like a lot of tension. Their relationship gets very sort of tense at that point. So good things and bad things can happen from the idea of prayer, or just the implication of praying towards it as well. So
And one thing we did get on is like the algorithm or the mathematical proponents that go into like measuring or manifesting.
yeah, the vessel itself has all these technical terms of ways.
Yeah, that'll have to, and also like the more the purer a prayer is, or the more well-intentioned.
The more well-intentioned gets answered more. There are foretelling algorithms that the vessel has acquired these powers from a parallel planet. This is all backstory stuff, but it is able to not. The reason it doesn't answer everybody's prayers, because people prayed for all sorts of things. People prayed for other people to die. People prayed for groups of people to die. So those prayers didn't really get answered because they're connected with this level of intention that is jealousy or hate or malice or racism, etc. And so only with the right level of intention, those prayers would get realized. And the rule was every human could have one prayer realized every 24 hours. At least that's how the machinery worked, until it got overloaded by the prayer farms and started glitching, which really kind of caused the whole world order to go upside down. And we believe enough people found out about the prayer farms and you know, the riots, the global riots that happened. We believe enough people prayed for it all to go away that it did, and we're left with these glitched artifacts of that time, trying to, you know, piece the story together. But more and more are being found. So
Looks
at
like
least
we have
that's how it closes out.
yeah, it looks like we have a question
Yeah.
on that as well.
Mhm. That's a great segue to this question from Pamela Polston, who says, "Thank you for this conversation. My question is, in the graphic novel or in a potential Netflix series, can you imagine the SpaceMosque reappearing to give humanity another chance?"
Yeah, that kind of, so the way the story happens, it's really a full circle, and the vessel comes from the future. And so the final takeaway is that it does happen in this cycle. So in a way, it kind of does give humanity another chance. But the vessel itself its purpose was to give humanity another chance, for it to be a conduit to connect it closer to the Almighty, or the, you know, the power of the universe.
Terrific. Sadaf, did I interrupt you, or?
Oh, I was just getting some water. I was thirsty.
Okay. Okay.
So yeah, it can go in all these sort of different directions, and it can have different sort of visual experiences with it as well, which is.
I actually have a question about that, the different visual forms that the SpaceMosque takes. Hesitant to ask this question because I really enjoy just assuming the narrative, taking the narrative as like a premise, and that's the world we're living in. But kind of stepping out of that for a moment, I'm really curious. I mean, you tell a really compelling story about explaining why this might be the case, that this vessel would appear in different forms to different people. Is that was that what led you to developing the vessel in different forms, or were you playing around with the technology and falling in love with different forms?
Chicken or the egg.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Both and. Yeah, great. Thank you.
Yeah, it's a nice device for me to keep building on it, and I was really enjoying building on it. And the shapes and ideas were flowing, and I didn't want them to kind of stop. And this sort of really worked out nicely, where it was universal and a-religious in that sense. I didn't want it to be just a story about Islam, or I wanted it to be like I said, just to build bridges and to get people to actually understand, oh, there's more to Islam, there's like interesting mythology or stories that can be told there, you know, oh, I can learn about a few things about it along the way as well. Oh, look, they're just like us, and we're all human. We all have the same desires and wishes.
Yeah. I want to bring it back to just something you said at the beginning, Danny, of like, you know, people in the exhibition have come through and just kind of like they're seeing just an exhibition that's influenced by Islam in a positive way. And I feel like it's also just cool. Like we're cool, right? Like, the stories we come from, the culture we come from, the architecture, it's like, it's not even just positive. It's like, it's in some ways it could even be desired, you know?
100%. Definitely.
Yeah.
Has been for
love that.
centuries.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Well, we appreciate it very much.
Yeah, well, feelings mutual. And Sadaf, you know, we've necessarily, of course, been focusing on Sachs and the work, but I really do want to, I can't overstate how much we appreciate you and the work you do, and the gifts you've given the Brattleboro Museum in the time that we've known you, and Nina Major's exhibit, and now this exhibit. And we can only hope that there are more to come in the future. But even the things that you're doing that don't necessarily involve Brattleboro and the Brattleboro Museum are so impressive and so important, and really appreciate knowing that that you're out there doing the things you're doing.
Thank you. We're all part of the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Well, that's the rock star.
Thanks.
Yeah, totally, both of you.
Right.
I definitely should have worn my shoes to like elevate my skills to kind of be on a approximate being on a par here. Do either of you have anything else that you want to that you want to add before we wrap it up?
No, y'all are wonderful.
No, just a great big thank you, and please come visit the exhibit. And I can be reached on my Instagram and website, or through Sadaf and Danny.
Yeah, and shout out to
Yeah,
the audience, Niash,
yeah,
Katie.
absolutely.
Y'all. Thank you.
Thank you both, and thank you everyone else who's out there tonight spending this time with us. And I'll echo what Sachs just said, which is come see the exhibit in person. If you find yourself in the vicinity, it's really worth checking out in person. We're open Wednesday through Sunday, 10 to 4. Admission is free. And the exhibition is up through October 19th. And I want to mention one other thing to all of you out there, which is that if you appreciate the work that the museum does and you enjoyed this event tonight and are able to make a donation to support this type of free programming and free admission and the kind of artwork that we're here supporting and bringing to the world, then we'd be very grateful for that. You can make a donation to the museum at our website, which is brattleboromuseum.org. Maybe even become a member of the museum. That would be really terrific. You can do that on our website as well. So I look forward to seeing you both again soon. And thank you again to the two of you and to everyone else.
Likewise.
Thank you for everything, Danny.
Good night.